Hello everybody, welcome back to the WatchGecko YouTube channel. Today we are very fortunate to be in conversation with Alistair Audsley, who is the CEO of the Alliance of British Watch and Clockmakers. We discuss the much anticipated show, which is coming up in March 2024 in London, where a number of British brands are attending. But more interestingly, perhaps we explore what makes a watch British and where the British watch industry is going. So, Alistair, thank you so much for joining us on the WatchGecko YouTube channel. How are you today?
I'm brilliant, Richard, and thank you very much for having me on.
Oh, it's an absolute pleasure. Absolute pleasure. Now, of course, diving straight in, we're all very excited about March. So can you, for those people that might not be familiar with what's happening in March, and gosh, we are because we're booked in for it, can you give us a feel for this wonderful event that's coming up early in the new year?
Absolutely. It's well, first of all, the title, it's British Watchmakers Day. And as hopefully the title describes, it's an event all about British watchmakers. And I believe it's certainly the first large-scale event that's been devoted exclusively to British brands. So we're obviously super excited. It's been a long time in the planning, and when we all land in London, I think it's going to be a wonderful day, a day really of celebration for our trade members, because it's the first time they've all got together. And I think that one aspect of the Alliance that I think has really helped to define both who we are and identify something really unique in our sector is that we function as a trade body, but really, Richard, we see ourselves as a community. And what's been incredibly eye-opening for me has been the sense of community that our members have, the level of cooperation, collaboration, mutual support that you see among the British watch brands, I think is incredible. And I think it's really helping to, as I say, to define our sector, what's unique about our sector. So it's going to be very much, I think, an introduction to a community of watchmakers. It's going to be big. That was really that's what we set out to achieve. And I think it's one of the reasons why it's taken quite a while to come. Notwithstanding, of course, the fact that when we launched the Alliance, it was during lockdown, November 2020. We've literally just, come through our third anniversary. And so we started out very much as a virtual organization, and consequently our initial events were virtual. Over the intervening 3 years, one thing that's been very clear from our members is a desire to have a live event. And that's also certainly been the feedback we've been getting from our club members as well. So I honestly, I can't wait. Just to have this culmination of 3 years' work come together at the Lindley Hall in London on March the 9th, 2024. It's certainly going to be a milestone for us.
I think I agree completely. I think the event looks outstanding. When you look at the cast list, it's all the names we're familiar with, and it's going to be such a pleasure to have all those represented in one room or two rooms or however it's laid out. I mean, just to see them all. We recently did the World Time event at Heathrow Terminal 5. And again, it's that wonderful moment. It's quite evocative if you are really into watch, when you walk in and you see all the names around all the tables, and you get a little tingle, and it's one of those moments where you realize why we love what we do.
I couldn't agree more, Richard. I mean, it's you're absolutely right. I think there is going to be a tingle going on, certainly for me, and in a way as well, it's just going to be so lovely to spend time with everybody together finally. I think it's going to be a great event for everyone who attends. We've tried to make it as easy access for everybody. The tickets for the public are only £10. They're free to club members, of course. So it's very, very worthwhile joining the club. But and again, I really hope that we get the level of support from the public that we've obviously got from the trade and all the British brands who are coming down.
Oh, I'm sure that'll happen. I'm sure that'll happen. So when I was thinking about what we could chat about today, there was an obvious question that came into my mind straight away. And I know what the rest of us might think, but obviously in your position, I'm curious to know, how do you define a British watchmaker? Do you define it by location, assembly, intellectual property, manufacture? Do you have a criteria?
Well, I think in part that there are several strands to that answer, Richard. I think one strand to that answer is what I would love a British watchmaker to be, or a British watch clock, or a British clockmaker for that matter.
Of course.
And then there's also the criteria for becoming a member of the Alliance and being recognised as a part of our trade. And I think that there is a journey from where we are now to where I would love us to be. And I think that without doubt, everyone would love a situation where British watchmaking, and when I'm saying watchmaking, I'm talking about mass watchmaking, has a completely indigenous supply chain from IP through to delivery to the customer. That is what I would like to see a British watchmaker.
It's fine and aspirational, yeah.
It is exactly. But then you've got to look at the practical steps that have to happen from the dream to the reality of that. And when we were founding the Alliance, obviously the co-founders with myself obviously are Roger Smith and Mike France from Christopher Ward. And Roger and I had a lot of conversations, as you can imagine. I've worked with Roger for about 14 years now as a consultant to the business. And so we'd been having a lot of conversations about what would be the criteria for membership for the Alliance. And I think that what we agreed above all, and very much so with Mike as well, was that if you're going to influence the heading of direction of a sector, then you can't do that if you exclude 90% of the people who make up that sector. So we agreed that we needed to try and have a clarion call that would get everyone inside the tent with us. And I'm a great believer. It's a simple fact. If you have one watch company that is a customer of an engineering company that might be making cases or dials, then that company has a customer. If you have 87 companies collectively under the banner of a trade body, now you're starting to look at what could be a market. And I think that by establishing a market, then I would like to believe that what we will be able to achieve is an acceleration along that journey towards more indigenous British manufacturing of watches. So I hope that kind of answers your question, Richard.
Yeah.
That there is an aspiration. I think that having Roger Smith really endorse and embrace that approach was hugely telling and influential for me, because if anybody has, if you like, the qualification to define what a British watchmaker is, then it's Roger Smith.
Of course.
But as we both agreed, if you basically said that all watches have to be made according to the Daniels method, which of course is how Roger built his watches, then we would have been the Alliance of Roger Smith. And that's not a very big trade body.
That sounds like a sinister spy novel.
It does, doesn't it? Yeah. Yes. Yeah, sort of thing where you sit around a boardroom table and people get electrocuted for failure. You know, that's. But we. No, I mean, it was hugely important, and I think that having Roger both as co-founder and also chairman of the Alliance has really helped to create an endorsement for this approach by the one person I believe who really has the creds to do that. So that certainly hopefully answers the criteria question. However, what's also been really interesting since we launched is learning and observing the Britishness that's starting to emerge within our sector. And I think a lot of that is to do with design and intellectual property. And I think that we've got some really very, very interesting brands emerging in Britain, in the British sector.
Oh, for sure.
And just leading from that, I think that when you look at the aptitudes that are coming into the sector, you know, this has been a really interesting aspect of this last 3 years. Is how many of our brands have been founded by people who've come from outside the watchmaking sector. And amongst those founders have been quite a few very, very capable and senior product designers, for instance. Funnily enough, I met with the guys at Bowcroft Watches recently. Bowcroft are up in Cambridge. They have a very strong product design background. When you talk to someone like Brian Leach, the founder of Siderius, Brian was a senior product designer for Apple during Celtic Tiger, and has a design intellect that he has brought into watchmaking, and which I think is going to really add a considerable value to the development of the sector. If you talk to someone like Matthew Humphreys, Matthew was a senior designer at Morgan Motor Company. Again, he's come in and into the sector, and he's applying his automotive design capabilities to develop his own aesthetic, but also bringing a new design discipline into the sector as well. So it's really fascinating, when you see this time and again where product designers are coming into the sector and are embracing their interpretation of what it means to create a watch. I think it's a really exciting place right now, and I think that is going to be, if you like, the fountainhead of what becomes a British watch in the future.
Yeah, no, I think it's great explanation. I think there's a couple of things I picked up on it. I mean, I think also one of the strengths of having an event like this is that it makes people focus on their Britishness, if there is such a concept. It's, it's like, what could we, because we really want to be part of this, but what could we do to enhance our, again, it's the word Britishness, I think is what I'm trying to say. And I think, and that to me is always quite interesting, because we often said as Gakota, if we exhibited overseas, would we fundamentally change the logo to have perhaps, a Union flag element or something in it? Because the Britishness, it's whether it be with Land Rover, whether it be with Aston Martin or whatever, there is an element of Britishness sells. It is still seen as an aspirational country of manufacture for people to buy things.
Without doubt, Richard. And I have the huge honour of being an ambassador for the Great Britain campaign as well, as the day job, if you like. And the Great Britain campaign is all about identifying the cohesive and common aspects of what Britain is really good at. And typically that is about luxury products. It's about creativity. You find there's a design wit as well that I think is unique to Britain. There's a certain degree of irreverence as well. And you see this across so many product categories, whether it is cars, whether it's fashion design, whether it's in watches and clocks, of course. And as we move forward, that is becoming more and more embedded in this design attitude that I think is starting to emerge with British watches. And I think as well that's combined, if you like, with the classic aesthetics that really came from the likes of George Daniels and which have been obviously exemplified by Roger, which is there is a practical functionality to British watches. I mean, you can read the damn time, you know.
You wouldn't believe how many watches we review where you can't.
No, exactly. And I think that again is one, you know, that is a bedrock of British design. And what I particularly appreciate when I look at the watches that our trade members are producing, they managed to combine that core functionality, but with a wit and a good degree of irreverence sometimes, which I find very, very charming.
It's refreshing.
It is, and I think it will stand us in very good stead moving forward. But you made a really good point, Richard, and that is that I think with British Watchmakers Day, it's going to be the moment where I think we're going to, when we attend, and you know, I speak for myself as well, I think we're going to have to kind of stand back and look at the whole. And when we look at the whole, we're going to see all these products and all these brands, and it will be an opportunity to start to really fully understand and embrace what it means to be a British watchmaker, and what that proposition is. And I think it's going to be a really fascinating moment, because we won't collectively have seen 44, 45 British brands under one roof before. I mean, it's the first time. So that's going to be an interesting moment, and I'm constantly reminding myself on the day, try not to just get swept away with the granular aspects of it, and you know the obvious stresses of running an event, but try and actually stand back and look at the whole and see what that means, because I think it's going to be pretty profound.
Well, I'll tell you what, I'll make a deal with you then, because there's that upper cafe area. I'll take you aside there for 5 minutes and say, Alistair, just step back for a minute and look at what you've achieved. Okay?
You're on. If it includes a cup of tea as well, you're definitely on.
Done deal. And you've segued beautifully into my next question. We were chatting in the office and we were saying, did we think there were any technical characteristics which defined a British watch? The reason I raised this is because, and I'm fully prepared to be corrected here, I believe that watches, like, again, there's the parallels to the automotive industry that we've both alluded to. They can be identified by their nationality. For example, I do think certain watches look American. I do think certain watches look Italian. There is some kind of DNA within them that you could spot. Yes, that's an American watch. And I was wondering, did you feel there were any technical characteristics? You've mentioned the legibility issue, you know, that you can actually read the thing. Are there any other characteristics that just you personally think highlight a British watch?
I think for me, Richard, it does come back to the functionality, and you know, there is a crispness to British design that's unfussy. And for me, that is ultimately the defining bedrock of what makes a great piece of British watch design. And there's an elegance as well. And I think even when you look at some of our trade members who have a particularly quirky approach, you know, I mean, whether it's a Mr. Jones or say a Studio Underdog, you know, they're very, very design led. They're very creatively led. I mean, with Mr. Jones in particular, you know, these are works of art on a watch.
Yeah,
but
absolutely.
But the brilliance of their approach is that it's not art just stuck on a dial gratuitously. It actually contributes very clearly to the telling of time. And you don't struggle to read the time even on a Mr. Jones, which is probably going to be pushing the boundaries as far as it can. So I think that beyond the functionality, I think there is an elegance of thought that goes within the design. At the moment, I mean, that is the, if you like, the technical characteristic as far as production is going at the moment. I mean, if I were to take it to the horological side of that, then for me, what I would love to see is every British watch has a coaxial escapement within its movement, because that is a British design. Obviously, George Daniels originally, Roger's advanced that with his single wheel iteration of the coaxial. But I've often spoken to Roger about this. You know, again, it's this dream. It's this. Wouldn't it be great if there was a British designed and manufactured movement, and hopefully we'll get there. That said, Richard, I mean, you know, it's a fairly well known fact that, you know, thanks to the heyday of innovation we had in Britain during the 18th and 19th centuries, about 3/4 of every aspect of the mechanical watch is a British invention. So in many respects, inadvertently, there is a British technical characteristic in every watch that's being made around the world.
That's a great point, and I think it'll. And I really hear what you're saying, and I think probably it's going to take the show in March to be that accelerant, or that's probably not the right word. It's a catalyst to get people focusing, and once you get all of those, even forget about the products sitting on tables. Once you get all of these like-minded people in a room, the flow of creativity and ideas, you might end up with 40 people saying, you know what, actually, I really think British watches should have technical characteristic A, B, or C. That kind of does define us a bit, because we all really love it. And I think that's probably why in the margins of the show, we're all so excited as what's going to come out of it as well.
I couldn't agree more. It's an incredible opportunity, and I think again, this comes back to my earlier point that we are a community of watch brands, and we're all on this journey. I think that everyone who's joined the alliance understands that we, it's a cliche, but how's a cliche become a cliche? You know, we are stronger together, and I think that they have all agreed to join hands as we bring Britain back to full resurgence as a watchmaking nation. It's an incredible opportunity, and I think that it's embracing the unique heritage we have as a nation, as the keepers of time for the world. The world sets its time by GMT, and that's Greenwich Mean Time, not Geneva Mean Time.
Yeah, absolutely.
We've got amazing symbols of time, with Big Ben. I mean, for me, is the world's clock. It's the most iconic, most recognised clock in the world. When you look at Stonehenge, even, I mean, that is a solstice clock in a way, and is an amazing symbol of time that shows that our Neolithic ancestors were considering and were ruminating on our place in the universe and how to measure time. So we have such incredible associations, and one aspect of that, which we probably need to work harder on talking about, is our innovation heritage. And I think that, again, this is a characteristic that as time progresses and our sector progresses, I think we're going to see a lot more innovation coming back into the sector as we collectively gain a better understanding and re-education of horology. That's going to happen. Again, talking obviously about the subject I know most about, which is Roger. Roger is all about innovation, and I think that sometimes there can be a fixation on what Roger does as a craft watchmaker. But I always say, when you look at what Roger's doing, it's handmade in the context of Formula One rather than Cistercian monks in our well-appointed cells. You know, it's what's next. How do you push the boundaries of mechanical watch performance? Every watch that he builds is a progression. It's how can I make the coaxial escapement more efficient? We've been working with Manchester Met University on deploying nanomaterials in order to try and find a solution to the age-old problem of lubrication. Oil-based lubricants have really both enabled and held back horological progress for many years. In fact, I think it was even Breguet who said, "Show me the perfect lubricant and I'll show you the perfect watch." I mean, I'm paraphrasing there, but you know, there was a recognition even then that was going to be a key facet of progress in watchmaking. So we've even been looking at, well, what if you could remove oil-based lubricants from, you know, take them off the table? And of course, with the coaxial escapement, we're in a really good place because it's it already has significant efficiencies over lever escapements embedded in its design and the way it functions. So, you know, this is an aspect that we're looking at. Roger invented this incredible travelling aperture for the calendar aspect of watches, where it had always annoyed him that with the standard window, you know, there'll be moments when it was obscured by the minute hand, and so he came up with this idea of, well, why not have that window travel round the dial? And that's subsequently been adopted by some of the bigger brands, and that's one individual. And we do have this incredible ability to innovate in this country. It's I think the other side of that, though, is that Britain has tended to always be the single person working in a shed type of innovator, and then other countries have tended to be the ones who've then industrialized those innovations or have taken them to the next level. Again, you know, you look historically at someone like John Harwood with the automatic wristwatch. I mean, very sadly, he invented that. He, by the way, and not many people know this, but he actually was based in Douglas in the Isle of Man as well. So you've got another great innovator on that small island. And Harwood invented that, but very sadly, the watch company he set up was a casualty of the Great Depression, and so his automatic movement eventually was fully exploited by the likes of Fortis and then Rolex, of course. So Harwood has been unheralded. I did manage to get him on a stamp though a few years ago.
Oh, that's good.
But as I say, you know, I think we need to be telling those stories and reminding the world that just how much innovation has come out of Britain, and then hopefully to inspire the next generation to be innovators, to be the next inventors, and to continue taking our journey forward.
I couldn't agree more. I just finished watching the last Formula One race this weekend of the season, and again, there are continual harkings back to the origins in Silverstone. You know, that community doesn't let go of that particular bone. You know, it does use it and deploy it strategically. You know, it is in essence a British sport, and it keeps coming out.
Absolutely, and I think in a way, Formula One is a great reference for our sector as we move forward. It's because it's also demonstrating and exemplifying the fact that if we can get back to innovating, then we can be the innovators for the world. And this is very much what's happening with the Formula One teams, and not only the Formula One teams. I mean, my daughter's partner works for one of the. He's a he designs fuel tanks for one of the supply companies near Milton Keynes for Red Bull.
Okay.
And again, he, mechanical engineering graduate, able to apply his skill and talent. He's a very talented young man to Formula One and to this incredible sector. And I absolutely, I passionately believe that's what we can do with watchmaking in Britain moving forward.
Okay, no, what a wonderful aim, wonderful aim. The event itself, I mean, from your perspective as an organizer, I mean, we've touched on it. I don't know if there's anything else you want to add about your objectives for the show itself. What would you consider to be your top 3 goals? I mean, other than the obvious that we've, started getting everybody in the room together is in itself a wonderful thing. If you could just say pick 3 things, if you've achieved them, you'll think, yeah, that was a success.
Absolutely. Well, getting back to the core purpose of the event, we want to sell watches, that when we sat down to really identify and work out what we wanted British Watchmakers Day to be, we want to showcase and sell watches. I mean, it's unashamedly a fair for our trade members to sell watches to the public and for the public to hopefully develop their own collecting journey. I mean, the wonderful thing about our sector is that you can start with a £50 watch and you can end with a £500,000 watch, which and pretty much everyone, with every step in between. And so I've always believed that there could be an opportunity for us to develop the collector of British watches. Let's start a new type of collector, if you like, who recognises that you can, as I say, you can start with your 18th birthday present watch, and you can end with one of the finest watches being made in the world today. As you can probably see behind me, I'm something of an avid collector of vinyl records, and
I did clock them.
When you look at the history of music in recent years, by 2007, I mean, they were virtually turning the lights off at the pressing plants with vinyl. We'd reached the nadir for me of basically pumping binary information through headphones with downloads and streaming. And when you think about the inconvenience of vinyl, I mean, you don't listen to vinyl music because of the convenience of it. You listen to it because of the experience. And again, it's differentiating between listening to music as a utility and listening to music as an experience. Much the same way for me, mechanical watches are an experience. They're not a utility. I mean, if I want to tell the time, if I want to look at the time, I can probably look at it on my microwave oven. But that's not an experience. That's not going to be something that makes my heart beat faster. It's wearing something on my wrist and having that object follow me through my life, be a part of my life, and that to have a tactility and a true experience. So there was something about vinyl, and I think also tapping into the move steadily towards the analog for people. And so back in, I think it was 2007, 2008, the record industry and the independent traders, who, by the way, were also closing down at a rate of knots at that time, got together and said, well, what if we just create this one day a year, where we release limited edition records by our top artists, and we only make them available through the independent record stores. And from that kernel, basically, you've got the revolution in music that we have today, where vinyl has now massively outstripped every other consumption product for music as the key driver of revenue back into the music industry. And it's woken a sleeping giant with the youth of today. It's when I'm at my market stalls and in independent stores, most of the people looking there, they're not, they're not silver surfers. These are young people in their early teens who are discovering music through vinyl, but above all, connecting with music through vinyl. And so, coming back to British Watchmakers Day, it was a case of, well, it happened in that sector. Our sector's actually resurgent. I mean, it's doing very, very well. But you used the term earlier as, not just a catalyst, but an accelerator of that process. What if we could create one day in the year where everything is about British watchmaking brands, but also to encourage those brands to release a limited special edition watch just for the day, that's only available at British Watchmakers Day. If you attend it, if you come to the Lindley Hall on the 9th of March next year, you can acquire one of these very limited special editions. And it's been amazing how that's been embraced by our trade members. I mean, I without exception, everybody said we want to do it. I think the only potential will be supply. Where because some of our makers are, they're almost struggling to keep up with demand as it is with their standard products. So, but I can honestly say, Richard, I mean, it's been embraced by everybody. Led, dare I say, by example from Roger Smith. Roger's building a unique Series 1 watch for the day. Now, bear in mind, Roger closed his order book in 2021. There's a 7-year waiting list. So him saying, out of the precious few watches I make every year, I will devote one to British Watchmakers Day.
No, that's quite an event, yeah.
It really is. And it's already yielding, as you can imagine, an awful lot of media and press attention, because it's a statement. It's a really powerful statement by our chairman. And I think what will make that watch particularly unique is the fact that, by the nature of Roger's work, there is always a degree of customization in the watches that he built. For me, this will be the Series 1 as Roger Smith would own it. It's the Series 1 that follows Roger's pure vision for his watch. And so, in a way, you will be buying effectively Roger Smith's vision for the Series 1.
How exciting.
It will be Roger's own.
How exciting.
So that's incredible. And you've got, we've been just liaising with Neil at Duckworth Prestex over the last few days, talking about his watch. I can't reveal much about it. In fact, I can't reveal anything about it at this stage. But believe me, the intent and the attention to detail that he's going to with it, it's going to be a very special watch. And you spoke earlier, a very interesting point that you raised about this collective sense of what is a British watch. And I think if ever there was a moment for the exhibiting brands to try and focus on that and define it, it's the watch they build as a special edition for British Watchmakers Day.
Yeah, you've nailed it. Yeah.
That's been a really fascinating aspect of these early conversations we're having as our makers contact us and say, hey, keep it quiet, but this is what we're thinking. And I have to say that typically there is a sense of the Britishness. Talking about innovation, for instance, I mean, Christopher Ward, this is public domain. Sorry, I'm having to think about not blowing.
Honestly,
not blowing a secret source.
We get so many watches through for reviews, videos, and everything pre-embargo. It's
yes,
where we're constantly thinking, what can I say? What can't I say now?
Well, right now, imagine me tiptoeing through an embargo minefield. But
I'll put my fingers in my ears.
Yeah, exactly. If I suddenly go up in a cloud of dust, you'll know I've got it wrong. Christopher Ward are building 10 bel cantos for the event. Now, the bel canto is British by virtue of innovation, in a way. I mean, there hadn't been a watch like that for many, many years, and they're very rare. And when they launched the Bel Canto, they sold out, I think, in 6 hours, and they've got several thousand people around the world who were effectively oversubscribed.
We were lucky to get one in for review, to be honest.
I'm sure. I mean, they were absolutely. I mean, so incredibly hard to get hold of, and the fact that there will be 10 Bel Cantos available on the day, and again with a unique design twist, is huge news. And when you start to cast that across all, hopefully 44 exhibitors, I think it's going to be super exciting. Are you allowed to talk about what Gekota's doing?
I could, but then 50,000 volts would probably go through my chair.
Right, well, we better. We'll have that conversation offline then.
Yeah. We will. That's a great idea. I just wanted to, if I may, I'm digressing very slightly from the structure I wanted to have. Is you said something, and I just want to reverse for a second, go back on it, because I thought it was beautiful, because it really resonated very personally with me, and I'm sure, hopefully, it will with other people. Is you were kind of alluding to this symbiotic relationship we have with our watches, as opposed to using a microwave or something. And I just wanted to read you something. As authors on the WatchGecko magazine, we all have a little paragraph at the bottom, and I just wanted to read you mine because I think it will fit in with exactly what you were saying. So at the bottom of all of my features is, I truly believe one of the best partners in exploration and adventure is a fine watch. Over 30 years of collecting, my fascination with the technical capabilities of both vintage and modern timepieces never abated, and it's a privilege to be able to share this passion through writing. I came out of retirement to do this job, and I've luckily been all over the world, mostly to hot, sandy places. And there's always been a watch has been a part of that experience with me since I was probably going back to 18. It's always been an integral part of my kit, my daily life, a good watch. And I think that when you alluded to it there, why we don't just use a microwave or your phone, I just wanted to reiterate, I thought that was a very good point, well made.
Oh, well, thank you very much, Richard. And I love, I mean, you articulate it beautifully in your piece there. But there is a profound relationship to be had with watches. And I think that as we've observed the burgeoning secondary market for watches as well, the collectors now are starting to truly embrace watches as something that has a right to sit alongside art, great art, and of course the great cars. They are a piece of mechanical art, and there is a profound relationship. And I think that in a way, for me, I think we have the most profound relationship with a watch out of those three elements. A work of art
wonderful can
resonate with us, but it's on a wall. It's not going with you. A car, obviously. I love cars. I mean, don't get me wrong. I think that most watch people very quickly cross over to cars, but it's not on your wrist all the time. I'm not sitting in my car right now. I mean, it wouldn't be a particularly great view if I was.
It's a very, very quick story, which, again, digressing, and then I promise we'll get back on track. Very good friend of mine has just had a life-changing experience with a watch. He's a young chap, and he writes for the magazine very occasionally, and he's just taken a watch underwater for the first time. And it, with a dive mask on, and he said it changed everything. Yes. Suddenly that 300 M, 660 feet, whatever, on the dial meant something. Suddenly he realized why that product was built. It was built to defy the pressure he could feel in his ears. It became so much more suddenly than the sum of its parts. And I was so pleased for him that he had that experience.
That's absolutely incredible. It's wonderful when you see that the connection being made. And I'd like to think that everybody is a latent watch person. And at some point, if they're lucky, if they're fortunate, they'll make that connection. But here's the interesting thing, and I think resonating from your point, it's often because of an experience. It's an endeavor.
Yes.
In many respects, this is probably why there is often such a corollary with watches and adventure and exploration and marking great feats.
Well, why did most of us buy an Omega Speedmaster? Let's be honest.
Well, exactly. And in a way, what those watches are doing, that if you like, the halo effect of those watches is that they're giving everybody the chance to make that, to have that feeling and to make that connection. So there's something truly profound about a watch, and the relationship that you can build with a watch. To know that it's there on your wrist all through your life, and it's a silent observer. It's watching you as well. It's knowing that there it is, quietly ticking away on your wrist.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think that they do mean something. It's I've mentioned this before on a podcast, so this will probably end up on the edit room floor. But when I was away from home overseas for long periods of time, I always kept the red GMT hand on my Explorer 2 to home time. But it was nothing to do with knowing when to phone home. It pointed to home in my mind. It was always, it still is today. It's very powerful, that little red hand to me still today.
Well, I mean, you know, it's so poignant because obviously that's connecting you to the memory of how it made you feel when you were abroad. So there's a real quality to that.
Alistair, you mentioned.
Go for it. The other, we were talking earlier about what we want to achieve with British Watchmakers.
Yes.
So there's the selling of watches at the core of it, but also it's a statement. And with a trade body, as we are, you have stakeholders in your sector, and those stakeholders, obviously, at the core of that are your makers and your collectors, your buyers of watches. But also, I do a lot of work with government to help raise awareness of us as a sector now. I mean, dare I say it, before we founded the Alliance, it was undefined. It was a rumour, really, of a sector. And I'd like to think that if we've achieved one thing, it is that we have now defined and established that there is a British sector for for watches and clocks. So we will be inviting senior figures from government to come along to the day, because it's there's nothing more visceral than to be able to say, here it is, we're back. This British watchmaking, clockmaking sector I've been talking about, and if you like, theorizing on, here it is. It's right in front of you, and I think that will hopefully help to continue to win friends in the public sector for us. And that's very helpful when it comes to conversations about export and opening up new markets, especially when, the kind of tier one markets that we've really identified, which are obviously the USA, but also the Middle East, which is really increasingly switched on and turned on to British watches.
It's huge.
And
absolutely enormous. I spent the bulk of my adult life in Abu Dhabi, and it is watch central.
Yes, it is, and it's wonderful to see how British brands are now starting to break into the into that market.
Especially, dare I say, within the expat community. When you're an expat, you kind of have an urge. I'm not talking about the indigenous community to the same degree, but when you're an expat, of which, take for example the UAE. 89%, I believe it was, the population of Dubai is expatriate, of which a proportion is British. Everybody wants to wear a British watch. You kind of want to fly the flag a bit.
Well, that's a wonderful point. But, we are getting quite significant breakthrough indigenously as well,
Cool.
in particular in the UAE. and again, in some respects, that's evidenced by what's happening in the secondary market. So we, on November 5th, we saw a world record for Roger Smith George Daniels Millennium Watch, which sold for, I think it was 2.4 million Swiss francs. But it was bought by a Middle Eastern collector. And what we're finding, particularly in the Middle East, is that there's an evolution of watch enthusiasm and collecting that is now going beyond the obviousness of brands. It's going beyond, what I think has been somewhat stereotyping. But I remember talking to a senior person in fashion, and I was asking, what is it about these items of clothing which are just basically a really brash advertisement for the brand? You don't, have a huge brand name on it. And in those days, and I'm going back quite a long time, they said, well, it is a Middle Eastern thing. They like to wear their brands. They like to, literally wear their heart on their T-shirt. And, but now, certainly in the watch market, and I think in other markets, we're starting to see an educated and discerning collector emerging indigenously in those markets, and in other markets around the world, where they want to know more about the story, and the founding principles of the watches that they're buying, and who's making them, and why they're making them, and what's inspiring about their story. And what that's done is, certainly in the upper end, it started to really accelerate where the independents are going. So not just the likes of Roger, he cast around the world the likes of F.B. Journe and Philippe Dufour and Kari Voutilainen and so on. Whereas 10 years ago, that wouldn't have happened. I mean, it would have been the obvious brands. So there's definitely something really quite exciting happening over there, and it's good for Britain because they like what we have to offer.
Yeah, no, I agree. I could see a sea change even when we were leaving there. You a little while ago you mentioned the club, and I've got a note because I must ask. How does one join the club? Because there'll be people watching this who hopefully think, I want to participate.
Well, and they will be very welcome to do so as well. We established the club originally to provide the, if you like, the collector and enthusiasts mirror to our trade members. And so the club is a subscription-based club that you can join. You can join by visiting BritishWatchmakers.com, and you'll see on the tab, you'll see a little join button up there. Just follow that through. It's £55 a year to join the club, but we've been very fortunate to gain some brilliant media partners. So if you join, you actually get digital and print subscriptions to the likes of GMT Magazine, Oracle Time, Europa Star. Europa Star actually do physical globally. Some of them, because obviously of the postage, are UK only. And Retail Jeweller have just joined us as a media partner, as well as obviously, the likes of yourselves and Scottish Watches, Bark and Jack are on board. So you get access to some great subscriptions, which frankly, I think now if you add them up, were significantly more per year than the actual cost of joining the club, which hopefully makes it even more worthwhile. But I'd like to think that the reason people have joined is because they're enthusiastic about British watch and clock makers. They want to get the inside track. We invest a lot into content for our website and our own growing channels, and it is very much an inside track. And of course, if you join the club, you get into British Watchmakers Day for free as well.
Wow, what an incentive!
Well, hopefully, yes, absolutely. And also, of course, you get your pin badge and a certificate, which is hand signed by both Roger and Mike. So you get something hand signed by Roger Smith, which is wonderful. In fact, we just got a new batch of certificates because we were running low. Roger was away at Dubai Watch Week, and the day before he went, we basically almost, had to pin him to a desk and say, "Please, can you sign these certificates?" So I assure you, these are not printed; they are hand signed. Because we've had several stressful moments where we've been getting down to the last 2 or 3.
Oh my goodness!
So Roger, and Mike, both hand sign, and it is a bit of a logistical thing, as you can imagine, because we have to get them to Maidenhead for Mike to sign, then sent over to the Isle of Man for Roger to sign, then back to us for sending over to our new members. But we have members, I believe, now in 24 countries, and we also a big part of what we're doing, and I think a big focus for the Alliance, certainly as you'll start to see from next year, is careers and education. So. At the moment, I've been doing sort of, if you like, an ad hoc roadshow of the educational establishments. I visited Westminster College last Friday, and I was joined by, excuse me, Andrew from Zero West.
Okay.
And I gave a talk to the students about the British watchmaking sector, because a lot of students, as you can imagine, are still coming through through training with the assumption that the only jobs available will be in repair, and certainly where Westminster is concerned, a lot of restoration as well, certainly with clocks. And what we're trying to do is to really open the eyes of both students and the educators to the fact that there is a making sector here, and so many of our makers now are starting to, tentatively bring more making back, whether it's through assembly, whether it's through assembly and quality control. It is starting to come back. And of course, we need skilled people to be able to perform those functions.
Absolutely. I said only the other evening when I was out with the CEO of the Gecko Group, I said, I wish I'd stumbled across you when I was 18.
Yes.
We as a company certainly do have that philosophy of training the next generation. It's very important, I think, to the Gecko Group, whether it be in watch journalism like I'm doing, or production or whatever, sales, marketing, anything connected to the industry.
Well, I'll come back to that in a second. Actually, it was something that that is a particular interest for me. But just with back to the club. So we give students free membership to the club. So if a student is on an accredited UK course, whether it's at Westminster, through the BHI, whether it's through Birmingham City University or the British School of Watchmaking, they can join for free. Because again, we just want to encourage them to learn about and interface with our sector. But just coming back to where do we find talent? There's going to be a significant shift over the next 10 years. And I think that at the base education level, we've got to start looking at ways in which we don't prepare children now for jobs which won't exist in 10 years due to AI. And I think we're going to have to profoundly change our aims and goals and strategy for education, because the traditional professional jobs are going to be endangered. There's no doubt about it. I mean, in my other world, in film, I mean, we've just had a major strike occur in the USA with the Writers Guild of America and the Directors Guild of America because of fear of artificial intelligence coming in. And AI is already working as a very able assistant for writers, I guess for journalists as well. It's when I was talking to Jeremy at BCU, Birmingham City University, Jeremy was saying that they're having to look now at, do they stop having essays as a part of the process of assessing students because of the ability to either have AI do the heavy lifting or all of the lifting with the turning in of essays. I mean, for a former crammer like myself, I mean, if it had been around in 1985, believe me, my degree probably would have been a lot better than it was. But there is going to be a profound shift. And I think that one of the shifts that's going to happen, and this is where we've got to think differently as a sector, is that we're going to have a generation, I think, of over 40s, over 45s, who are having to look at their career and are going to have to redefine their own objectives and look at potentially retraining and becoming, why not, a watchmaker in due course. A lot of our founders, if you think about it, have often had a prior career. I was talking about product designers, but we've got a lot of people who've come from a marketing background or as entrepreneurs. And that could now start to cascade through different levels of watchmaking, so that we could have people who've been working in a sector who find themselves increasingly under pressure, or finding themselves in a career cul-de-sac, who might want to look at retraining and doing something different. When I was talking, I asked the principal at Westdean about this, actually, when we were chatting. And I said, look, are you finding, are there any trends that are starting to happen where you're noticing this? And mature students, believe me, are a significant upward trend across all the crafts. And I think that we would be missing a trick as a sector to only be looking at young people, dare I say it, because it's a very competitive market for talent. I mean, I sit on the economic sector panel for consumer goods for the Department of Business and Trade. And, I'm with a lot of peers who are CEOs of other trade associations. And Richard, they're all saying the same thing. We've got to find more talent. To help the resurgence of our own sectors, because we're not the only ones who've lost indigenous supply chain. It's happened across virtually every manufacturing sector of British industry and craft. So we're going to be, we're now heading into a very hungry market for talent. And I think as a sector, we've got to think smartly, and we've got to look in other places for where we can find that talent. And watchmaking and clockmaking, I think, is an amazing second career for somebody to embark on. It's very worth investing in themselves to get the training. Yeah. And let's face it, from a demographic perspective, we are living younger for longer. Pension ages are going steadily up. And I think we are now heading into a society where there will be a phenomenon where people can have one career, kind of retire at 40, 45, and start another career. And they will have the time and the energy to do that.
I'm living, breathing proof of that.
Yeah. Well, you are. As I say, as a sector, I think there's an opportunity for us to look for talent, not necessarily where everybody else is, but where there is a rich theme of talent. I had a really interesting chat recently. I was introduced to the CEO of another not-for-profit like us called Brave Start, and they specialise in nurturing people. I think it's over 40s or over 45s into second careers. As a fresh start. And, and I was, their CEO was saying to me, we are finding that more and more people are knocking on our door now. And I think it's going to move from if you like, a niche to a major trend over the next 10 years.
I think it's really interesting. And I think your your society and the club are great foils for this to happen, to allow it to happen, because they're highlighting, as you've just said there, they're highlighting the issue, they're highlighting the opportunity. And I agree, and I think there is if you're looking at guys whose beards are the color of mine, we've kind of been through the tunnel of the Swiss giants. We've discovered probably the more eclectic designs that we've grown to love. We're more interested in how it functions rather than what name it says on it or how much it costs. And we're probably, by virtue of the fact that if you had 10 people around you having this conversation, the risk of stating the obvious, they must be interested in the subject matter or they wouldn't be there. So we should be capitalizing on these people and utilizing them.
No, without doubt, we really should. And I think that one of the very positive aspects of this, of course, is that I think we're going to see a lot more women, talented women, coming into our sector because, again, the opportunity to have a rebooted second career path. I think that's going to be very, very exciting. And one of the wonderful aspects of watch and clockmaking is, at the end of the day, if you're talented and you have a genuine interest, it's open to all. It really is a genuinely open to all. And there are wonderful career opportunities, I think, to be had, and it's going to be increasing over the next 10 years as more and more of our trade members bring making back into Britain. And then, of course, alongside that, the other thing we can't forget is the fact that you've got all the support roles that are around. It's not simply people working at the bench. We've got to encourage people who are going to become lifelong administrators in watchmaking, accountants in watchmaking, salespeople in watchmaking, marketeers. There are all these very vital support roles where people will develop a specialism. And again, as a trade body with 87 members as we speak today, I think we're about to become 88. But you're also showing that there's a jobs market there. That there's the ability to have a transferable career path where you work for one brand for 3 or 4 years, and then you might find that there's a new opportunity as another brand. Mm-hmm. You might end up circling back to the original brand after 10 or 15 years. But it shows now that getting a job at a watchmaking or clockmaking company isn't necessarily just a job and a transition then through to a role in a completely different sector. No, there is a path to be had here, and I think the more we can promote and educate that, then hopefully the more people it will encourage into the sector.
Well, I absolutely applaud you for that attitude, and rest assured the WatchGecko magazine and YouTube channel will do all it can to further the cause.
Well, thank you, because without platforms like yours, we're a rather lonely voice, so you amplify it and have a vital role to play. So thank you.
Thank you very much. To perhaps draw a conclusion to this, the future's bright. It would be clearly the way I'm looking at it. But from your perspective as an expert in the field, how would you see the future of British watchmaking? Let's pretend that our future selves are meeting in 10 years' time after 10 of these shows. What do you think we'll be talking about?
Well, for one thing, Richard, what I hope we'll be talking about is that we will have reached our goal of what Mike France originally coined as Project 1 billion. So at the moment, we, from surveying our sector, we believe that the retail value of watches being sold is somewhere between 180 and 200 million. Our aim in 10 years is to reach 1 billion. And that's ambitious, but part of the reason for setting an ambitious aim is to hopefully infuse that sense of ambition among the companies. Because you need a degree of belief. You've got to have belief and a sense that growth is there to be had. And thankfully we've got some big successful brands starting to emerge. I mean, obviously with Christopher Ward, with Vermont, of course. I mean, who've really forged ahead since their founding. Have recently had a significant infusion of investment, which itself is a profound statement for British watchmaking. I mean, when a company receives that level of investment, that shows that serious people in that world are taking our sector seriously and the opportunity. So, and then you have, other brands who have contributed so much to what I guess is part of the British attitude. I mean, when you think about people like Accurist, Seconda, and Limit, all under obviously the Time Products ownership. Seconda was, I believe, the first brand to sell 1 million watches in a year. And that's a British brand.
Yes.
And they're somewhat resurgent now, and are, they've been investing heavily in their next phase of brand development and so on. And what those larger brands do is they help to show the way for all the new startups, all the brands who are now in their second phase of growth. I mean, I was talking about Mr. Jones, who I think now they've opened a boutique store in London. They're employing about 15 or 16 people now. I know Fears have recently, I think, broken through the 15 employee barrier. And then, of course, our clockmakers. I mean, when you look at Smith of Derby, for instance, I mean, they, I believe, our single biggest employer within the Alliance. They have about 68 people across their group of clockmaking businesses. So it's infusing an attitude of can-do, that growth is there to be had. And so my first answer to that would be, in 10 years, I would love to be saying, Richard, we did it. We got to 1 billion. And we got to 1 billion because all our trade members incrementally grew their businesses and embraced the fact they don't just have to look at it as a lifestyle business. They can mature and grow and continue to grow into major businesses themselves. And I have to say, I think that is something we've observed since setting up the Alliance and developing this community. As more and more of the makers have started to meet each other and become aware of each other, they're also learning. There's a mutual learning, and there is an infusion of an attitude which says, actually, I thought I was a lifestyle business, but blimey, I can grow this into something really, really seriously valuable. And again, I mean, speaking, for yourselves, I mean, Gecko, you with Gecko and WatchGecko, you have this really interesting, you've taken almost an ecosystem approach to the way you're building and growing. And that's a very exciting and interesting way of approaching the development of both the channel and the brand. So that would be number one. We've reached 1 billion in terms of retail value of sales in Britain. I mean, that would be something else. I think that I would like to believe that we've now got this next generation of watchmakers doing more in Britain. In 10 years, will we have achieved a truly British indigenous mass-produced movement? I don't know. That's a big ask. But there are a lot of milestones that we might have achieved by then with regard to case making, with regard to dials, and perhaps some watchmakers. And I mean, let's, again, talking about Vermont earlier, I mean, they have, with the investment in the wing, the development of their cases. I visited the wing recently, and looking at how they're developing cases, but also how they have taken on this difficult journey to try and bring more manufacturing back into Britain. And, I think for anyone trying to do that, it is like walking down a dark tunnel, shining a torch at your feet. You're having to learn every stage. And Bremont have been very open about that. That's what they're, that's the approach they've had to take. It's a continual learning process. But I would love to believe that having shown the way from that perspective, others will have embraced that. And maybe some will be working together to achieve that. And this comes back to my earlier point about, one company is a customer, but 87, 88, hopefully by then 100 or more is a market, and it's a robust market that makes investment in the engineering required to build watches in Britain. It makes it a worthwhile investment. It makes one that actually investors can see an ROI path for making that investment. So, yeah, the dream would be that we will be talking about a fully indigenous British supply chain. I think it hopefully will have shifted from being a dream to an aim and a meaningful aspiration, and that we will have already achieved some significant milestones on that journey. So I think that's probably where I'd like us to be. I mean, Project 1 Billion would also have meant that we will have significantly expanded the market for British watches, and that we will have really taken a significant place. Look, we're never going to be Switzerland, but it'd be great to be number 2, and hopefully that's where we can aim for. I mean, just to slightly digress. When I was talking to the students at West Dean, I remarked on the fact that one of my inspirations is from the US rental car market of the 1950s. Now, that might sound counterintuitive, but bear with me. A very famous British advertising creative director was David Ogilvy. And when I was coming through advertising as my career, reading Ogilvy on advertising, that was one of the go-to texts. And in fact, I recommend it for anybody. It's a brilliant book. Ogilvy talked about the fact that they picked up Avis as a client. And at that time, far and away, the market leader was Hertz. No one was going to catch Hertz. And Avis basically came to Ogilvy and said, look, we're just one of the other players here, with all these other rental car companies. We're never going to catch Hertz. What do we do? And so, there's a lesson in business for everyone, I believe, and that is you could take a negative and work out how to pivot it into an opportunity or a positive. And what Ogilvy realized was there was no clear number 2. So he came up with this iconic campaign, which was, we're Avis, we're number 2, we try harder. And what that did was, in fact, it did help them close the gap to Hertz. But what it did, it put them in the same conversation as Hertz, and it elevated them from all the others. So now apply that to British watchmaking nations. And I would love to think that there's an opportunity for Britain, by describing ourselves as the other, as the challenger, the other player, we can help to push ourselves up and elevate ourselves from the others. I mean, just to quote, I'm sorry, I'm a bit of an advertising geek, but to quote another great British creative director, John Hegarty, there's a lovely, he wrote a really good book as well. And there's a lovely fable he tells in that. And that's 2 people come across a tiger, and one bends down, puts some running shoes on and starts tying their laces. And the other says, what are you doing that for? You can't outrun a tiger. And he says, I don't have to outrun a tiger. I just have to outrun you. And I think there's another lesson to be learned from our sector there.
As they used to say on British television, on that bombshell. No, I think, look, I think everything you're aspiring to do is wonderful. I think the vision for 10 years in our little fictional world for 10 years ahead is is achievable. I think it's realistic, and I think it would be wonderful to hopefully think we'll all still be part of it at that time.
Wouldn't it be just?
Yeah. It would be amazing. So, I mean, all that remains for me to do now is to say, Alistair, thank you so much for giving up some of your time for the WatchGecko YouTube channel. It has been a fascinating chat, and apart from the fact we hope to see, we're really looking forward to seeing you in March. Hopefully you can come back and talk to us again.
I would be delighted to anytime, Richard, and thank you, for giving us this platform. It's incredibly valuable.
Wonderful. Thank you so much again for your time. Well, wasn't that a fascinating interview? It was a real pleasure and an honour to hear Alistair's views on the future of the British watch industry, and also the aspirational idea of encouraging homegrown talent. If you found this really fascinating, then you'll be glad to know that we are going to visit a number of British watch firms preceding the date of the show, so stay tuned for those. As always, thank you so much for your time and for watching. Please subscribe to the channel, and we'll see you soon for some more watch news.